Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union and the ACRU Action Fund. Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Live Free TV. And what we want to focus on this time, you keep hearing this rhetoric from the Biden administration, being it Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Kamala Harris, and also Karine Jean-Pierre, that our children are not ours, that they belong to everybody, that they're theirs, meaning the state. And some of the things that we have seen come down, for instance, saying that teachers and some of these school districts are not going to inform parents about certain things about gender dysphoria, that they're going to disavow law that's been passed in states as far as how children are going to be treated. And they're just going to do whatever they wish based upon their ideological agenda. So I thought it'd be very important for us to talk about this issue of woke school policies, because I really believe that school choice, educational freedom, parental rights, this is a big civil rights issue, and it's a huge issue going to the 2024 election cycle. So I am joined today by my dear friend, Trayce Bradford. Trayce Bradford is the Eagle Forum National Issues Chair on Human Trafficking and the Policy Director for Freedoms Fund USA. She previously served as the president of Texas Eagle Forum for the past 4.5 years, and before that served as president for Dallas Eagle Forum for 4 years. She was presented the Outstanding Eagle Award by Eagle Forum founder Phyllis Schlafly and the Patriot Award from the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C. Trayce is a homeschooling mother of 7, a wife of 35 years, grandmother of 3, and a native Texan. She also ran for lieutenant governor here in the Lone Star State. Trayce Bradford, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Free TV.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You have a great reputation across this state of being engaged and being down there for legislative sessions. I believe for the past 14, almost 16 years, you've been involved in the legislative process here in Texas. One of the things that concerns me is, why do we not see educational freedom and school choice being successful here in the state of Texas?
Well, I think there are a lot of components at work. I actually was on one of the committees for the GOP. I was on a subcommittee for the school choice issue. And, with the Eagle Forum, there's a background there that we were not exactly all thrilled about school choice for some very particular reasons. Not because we don't want parents to have the right to educate their children and to do that as they see fit. That, for me as a parent, for me as a Christian, is the number one thing, that my children are my responsibility and my husband's responsibility. And one of the reasons I was on that committee was to be going through every bill. We read through all the school choice bills because we wanted to make sure that the idea of making sure that children can have access to a good, solid education, which I believe for the most part we're seeing a drift, obviously, here in our country. There are great teachers, but there are a lot of teachers who feel entitled to our children. And what we wanted to make sure was that any school policy, any choice moving forward, we want to be careful the government is not sticking themselves in there by controlling curriculum, because that's really where we're struggling right now, is these teachers and administrators are hiding things from parents. We get calls all the time from laws actually being broken in schools that we've seen passed. We finally get something passed in the Texas legislature to protect our kids. And you've got school districts that think they can ignore it. So why do we not have school choice in Texas? I think because there wasn't a solid bill to begin with. I believe that we need more parents engaged on this discussion to understand when the rubber meets the road, it is the parents' responsibility to be involved in knowing what is being taught in those schools, knowing what your options are. I don't think many parents understand that, and knowing that they have to be engaged. We also, as we've talked earlier, have I think we have a lot of identity crisis in our own party and our own government here in Texas. I'm not sure we understand where we fall.
Yeah. It's interesting in that I think the only positive that came out of the whole COVID thing was parents being shut in the house with their kids, and all of a sudden they're looking over the kid's shoulder and they're starting to scratch their head. What is this
Is
that
that
you're being indoctrinated to, not even educated towards? Is this phenomena of all of these woke school policies and all of this indoctrination, is it something very new? Or is it something that has been happening over a period of time and we just not been paying attention to it?
I think they've ramped it up significantly since about 2017. But
Mhm.
when you look back, when we were working to fight against the mental health bills, where they were trying to bring these assessment in on kids in the classrooms, we started digging because being an Eagle with Phyllis Schlafly, you better know your stuff. You better know the history. You don't just go talking about things that you've not researched and you don't know what the impetus is. And if you look back, it was in the 1940s where you had psychology, education, and philanthropy all come together. And they talked very openly about this. Their goal was to remove the soul, that there would not be a right or wrong for children. And then you can kind of co opt and put in whatever you like. Well, where are we? You can be whatever you want to be. You want to be a cat? You can be a cat. We have moved. I think for years we were moving in that direction. And you could go back, and argue Dewey and humanism and that kind of thing. But I think what we've seen take off since we were trying to get the Privacy Act passed in 2017 is astounding that it's gone that quick. We thought back then the genderbread man was ridiculous to be showing to little kids. If what you could see, the basic trash that they're putting in a lot of these schools now, it's terrifying. And again, I want to go back to, there are great teachers who love kids and want to educate children, and then there are teachers who think they are entitled to your children.
Yeah. It was interesting when you talk about, people that believe they're entitled to your children. I'm reminded of the infamous statement that Terry McAuliffe made during the Virginia gubernatorial debate, where I'm paraphrasing, parents have no right to decide what their children are being taught. And without a doubt, he made, educational freedom and this whole parental rights and parental choice a forefront issue in Virginia. Do you think that we see a tide that is turning? More people are now getting out there, running for school board, attending school board meetings. And of course, now the left is upset about that. But do you think that this is a sustained moment, or hopefully it's just not a flash in the pan?
I hope it's the beginning of something.
Yeah.
I hope we're at the front end of parental engagement, people realizing that it's we the people, that you get on those school boards, you form those curriculum review groups. I mean, some of these parents have done astounding work by being willing to go through every line of curriculum from COVID. These are parents that will tell you when they heard and saw what was going on. And I'm excited because I do think the only way we turn this entire ship of this nation is people being involved, parents being involved. I think the parents actually are going to drive it, because there's nobody better to fight for your child. And I will tell you right now, having 7 kids, where were you when I was in months of bed rest? Where were you when we're up in the middle of the night? Where were you when we're making emergency decisions for our children's health? When you want to come in and start to mess with their little minds, that we have the responsibility of training up and nurturing, we've come to a very scary place. And the only way this turns, I believe, is by parents saying enough, by parents not being worried about being canceled, by parents not worrying about being called ugly names, but by parents willing to say, I'll put the time in and go sit at those school board meetings if I need to. I'll rally people to be at these school board meetings to tell them we don't want basically pornography in our libraries. I'm excited. I want to think and look at this as we are seeing the beginning of a very strong movement of parents standing up for their children and for other children.
Yeah.
I know they like to throw back a lot of times Well, not everybody, I've even had a legislator say to me, well, not everybody's an engaged mom like you. Well, that's no reason to fault or blame or put that on my own children. And, we had kids in our neighborhood that they came to our house. We homeschooled, but those kids would come to our house after school because they needed a place to go. We have the ability as neighbors, as family, as churches. Look at Tony Evans' church that has been mentoring kids for years. Men in the community help kids with their school work when they come home. We are the answer, not the government.
You bring up a great point, and one of the things, the initiative of the ACRU is what we call Live Free Local. What are some of the recommendations you think that parents, moms, dads can do locally to help with this situation of educating our children and making sure that they are free from the government indoctrination and the state-centered, quote unquote, education and woke policies? What are some of the things that you recommend can be done locally?
Well, I'm going to say pray. Always be praying for your kids, but be praying for your teachers and be praying for those administrators. Get to know the teachers and administrators. Be a face, just like we tell people to do with politicians. They need to know your face so they know that there's someone holding them accountable. I think the parents need to do the same thing. Like, again, we've seen parents gather together and go through curriculum line by line to be able to present to the school board specific concerns. And sometimes, honestly, some of these school boards just didn't know. And now I'm not saying that's always the case, but I want to encourage parents to not be fearful to push back, to not be fearful to ask questions, to not be fearful to report when there's activity that you're not getting a response from those teachers or those administrators, school board. You may have to go. We've had situations where there's behavior in classrooms that's unbelievable. I mean, pornography being spread by a fourth grader on their iPads to all the kids in the class. And the school is like, just, we don't want to cause a problem. You may have to, you have to be the one that will continue the process. Call out when you see a problem with the curriculum. Don't let them shut you down. We see that sometimes when people want to go speak. I've had people tell me, I'm afraid to speak in public. Well, there's not a better time to speak in public than for your child.
Yeah.
And so I think there are, the other thing, I've got a friend, man, she is on a warpath in a good way. They're replacing people on their school board every session. They have now got up to 4 on one school board and 3 on another. And when they see something going on at a school board hearing, or they start looking and things aren't adding up, they ask to see the curriculum. They send in FOIA requests. I mean, they are following up and letting, not in a rude way, not in a, I never tell people go scream at someone, but you have to stand your ground, and you have to be willing to go the extra mile for that child and for kids in general, because we really do see in this nation, there's an attack on children. Why are we hypersexualizing our children? Why are we telling them, even approaching this issue on gender? And some of the other issues. But I really want to encourage parents. The other thing they can do is make sure they have an opt-out or an opt-in policy in their schools, and what if the schools are following them. I prefer opt-in, because that way you have to say yes to questionable curriculum.
Yeah.
If it's an opt-out, they can then say, oh, we forgot to send the thing home. Oh, we sent it home, you didn't see it. We learned that the hard way. But when
no, go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, when you can get an opt-in, it makes the school more responsible to get the information to the parents. So you say yes or no to that particular assessment or program.
One of the things, shifting and speaking politically, you always hear folks talk about the importance of the suburban women, the suburban moms, the soccer moms. Do you feel that this issue of education, do you feel that this issue of education policy, education freedom is going to be a preeminent issue in the suburban women's realm? I mean, you travel all over the state of Texas. You've been laying your eyes on a lot of moms out there. What's the feedback you're getting?
There are a lot of engaged moms, and these women they're sharp. They bring the thing I think I like to see with women always do things in like groups. Like we tend to be relational, so we build teams.
Yeah.
And the other thing I am seeing though is more dads. And let me tell you, as somebody who I've been involved with Promise Keepers for years and years, and I've always been very supportive of our fathers, our husbands, our brothers, our sons, and you're under attack as well. And
Yeah.
so I like the fact we're seeing more fathers step up and vocalize at these school board meetings and testifying. We saw more dads starting to testify, because I can tell you, when we did the Privacy Act, it was mostly women, and there were about 30 of us and about 400 from the other side.
Mm. So we have got to really step the game up, because it seems that you always see the dominant voice coming from the other side when they talk about quote unquote women's issues, but they don't talk about education being an issue for women. They don't talk about the economy being an issue for women. They don't even talk about this unfairness to young girls in the sports arena as an issue.
Yeah, that's a telltale sign to me. You always watch what their words are and then what their actions are.
Mm.
And how could that not be a bigger gift, in the sense of, if you've been fighting for women and equality, and to see these girls compete and work so hard to compete in whether swimming, racing, whatever the sport is, and a guy who was ranked 400th, I hope you're proud of yourself. It's unbelievable that we're at this place. But we're the ones that can turn it around.
Well, let's shift and talk about another aspect of something that you're involved in. You're the policy director for Freedoms Fund USA, and you're also the national issues chair on human trafficking there for Eagle Forum. We live here in Texas, and we see the ramifications of having this open border. And I think more people are attuned to it now after this movie, Sound of Freedom, with the human and child sex trafficking that is going on. How big of an issue is that, you think, also for women here, not just in Texas, but all across the country?
This is something that I thank God the lid has been blown off of, because for 20 years, we've been talking about this, and you could search the internet here to try to find information on trafficking in Texas or even in the United States, and you could find hardly anything. It was all somewhere else. But we know it's here. We know I was down at the border, and we saw little footprints, where you were right there on the border where they were coming across. And when you end up with thousands of children missing, when you end up with people talking about finding 3 little girls on their property that had just been left there, we passed I worked with a man to pass a bill a couple sessions ago that had to do with sexually oriented businesses losing their license. They employ a number of these underage girls. And this is one of the ways they bring these people over, and you're supposed to pay off, your debt. Mm-hmm. Well, they're being trafficked. And whether it's in labor trafficking or sex trafficking, and I got to tell you, when I saw some of these groups come out, I think it was Rolling Stone, some of these others, and saying this is just, that they worry too much about pedophilia, and this is another conspiracy theory. It's a QAnon. I'm like, are you a flippin' idiot? I mean, have you ever looked in the face of a woman who's been trafficked as a child even? Have you ever sat down and looked at these videos where these people share their stories? That was gut-wrenching for me to see them mock that, because the only thing I'm left with is you're either aiding and abetting it, mm-hmm. or you're part of it directly. There's not a lot of gray area there, because you're talking about children. And there is a market. And I will tell you, they talk about it more openly. I watch some news in Europe and places, because they will talk about there are pedophile rings. They will talk about what we are doing to children, and to draw it all the way back to the gender identity. What do we think is happening to our kids?
Yeah.
They're being broken down around their modesty, those protection mechanisms that they come with, God-given, and they're being groomed. This is what this does. It breaks them down. When you keep showing them this explicit information, go back to the fourth grader that was sending the pornography around. She was in it. Think about that.
Well,
These kids.
the amazing thing, Tracy, is that we know the statistics. I mean, our kids are not reading at grade level. They're not doing math at grade level. COVID really set them back, because we had the teachers' unions and everyone keeping schools shut down. And now we see that the emphasis is more so on this ideological agenda, this gender dysphoria and all of these things that they think the children should be exposed to. And our children can't even make a decision to get a tattoo, but yet all of a sudden they're supposed to be able to make a decision to mutilate their bodies, and parents are supposed to go along with that. And if the parents don't go along with that, the state comes in and takes away the child, or the teachers aren't even telling the parents. So we have a real big issue with what the left, and as a matter of fact, you can't say pedophilia anymore. They're saying that you call it minor attracted persons. Why is it? I mean, I try to wrestle with myself. It's just pure evil to me. But why is it all of a sudden the left is so focused on this sexual indoctrination of our children?
You have to really ask yourself, don't you? I mean, you break down, to me, part of it's separating children from parents. Because when you do this, you tell them the enemy is the parent. They don't understand you. They wouldn't get this. You see that kind of grooming tactic a lot, and you see that a lot when they're trying to groom for trafficking. But now we're seeing it in classrooms.
Yeah.
Where teachers will be telling, and it gets back to this entitlement. They feel they own these children. And it's like, they may think they're grooming them to think like them, but that's not what they're doing. And that they're literally breaking down the mechanism of protection that come with a child. You have to train them. You teach them these things. And to be putting this in their heads all along, while you're also starting to put clinics on campus. You're putting there's one down going in, there's several districts, Denton and another one here in Texas. And they word it, you said something earlier about the pedophilia, minor attracted. As soon as I start seeing word changes, you're like, red flag, red flag. I'm sorry, we're not going there. And we need to be aware of, we may read something and it sounds good. You want to have a clinic on campus, and this gives access to children who might not otherwise have it. And of course we want children to have access to what, a doctor if they need it. But that's not what this is about. And this is about more control. You have assessments you're now doing in the classroom. These kids you're asking questions to children. We talked about this, I think, before, and I talked about it, and we campaigned about the ACEs test, adverse childhood experiences. And the first question was, have your parents ever hurt your feelings? I mean, there is, you said it's evil. It is. And we know as believers that there is a root to all of this. With that said, we have an incredible opportunity to stand for righteousness, which is one of the things that Freedom's Fund, we talk about. We want to stand for righteousness, and we want to speak truth, and we want to protect freedom. Well, all of that needs to be done. If we're not doing that in our home, if we're not doing that for the least of these, for the little ones, then how can we do it for a nation? Yeah. And the basic thing you could do for a child is to protect their innocence, and it's to protect them from over sexualization. I mean, when you have kids that can literally figure out at that young an age, that's not one situation. People, I don't know if you saw us, but when we were campaigning, you'd have people go, "That's not happening. That's not in our schools." And I can't tell you how many times we could sit there and go, "Okay, I actually know someone that lives in your district. Let's talk about this." Because we have people that reach out to us, whether it's the mental health issue or it's some of these other issues. And and it breaks my heart because
Yeah.
not everybody can homeschool, and that's not everybody's cup of tea, and I understand that. But the blessing I had as a mom to train my children to learn how they learned, critical thinking skills, just we're robbing children. We're robbing them. Some of the best things kids can be doing is playing,
Yeah.
you
Being
know,
a kid.
being a kid. And and they talk about, with social emotional learning, and they talk about now we want emotional intelligence, EQ instead of IQ. And I'm like, I don't know, were you raised to be an absolute jerk, but by golly, you're smart? No.
Yeah.
I mean, I could list all my teachers from elementary school and give you something each one of them taught me about being kind. I mean, I was taught that with my family, but it's not like that we can't just do it by how we treat each other. This is nonsense what they're doing. This identity and be you, and that's how they fulfill themselves. No, it is an illness. The gender issue that's going on, this transit, all of that is an illness, and we aren't loving and we're not caring by aiding and abetting it in any way.
Yeah, it's interesting because basically what the government is trying to say is that parents, you can't be a parent, and parents, you're not supposed to, try to keep your child in a certain way and on a certain path. You're supposed to accommodate any of the whims of your child. So I guess if your kid comes up to you and says, "Hey, mom, dad, I want a shot of bourbon," you're supposed to give them a shot of bourbon. This is it's absolutely insane. But like you said, we've got to get back to that parental involvement, and adults have to be adults, and we got to focus on educating our children, not indoctrinating our children. So, Tracy, how can people follow you? All the work that you're doing as the National Issues Chair on Human Trafficking and the Policy Director for the Freedoms Fund USA.
Well, if you the Eagle Forum is the nationaleagleforum.org, and then Freedoms Fund USA is freedomsfundusa.org, and we're wanting to get more people. We want to get more women involved in the national security discussions. You brought up earlier about we're leaving women out of some of these discussions like economy, and we want to have that discussion. And again, there are things we can do even with national security to get involved. So
Yeah.
I thank you for what you're doing.
Oh,
Yeah. You. I had somebody today go, if he runs again, I'm following him wherever he goes. So
well, I'm
no, I
running. I'm
appreciate it.
running in the morning, so tell them to join me here about 5:30.
No,
And
I had somebody say, "Are you going to run again?" I said, "Yeah, the other direction." Well,
well,
thank you.
you keep standing up and fighting. That's something that I've admired about you since I moved back here to Texas in 2014. Is your commitment, your dedication, your resolve, your courage, your conviction, and your character. And I don't think that there's too many people out there more savvy on the issues and able to articulate legislative solutions like my dear friend Trayce Bradford. So I thank you for joining us here on Live Free TV.
Thank you, sir.
God bless.
Bless you.